Emergency responders of Reddit. What are some dumb things that have lead to an emergency situation? I had a client once who was basically Ricky from Trailer Park Boys. Loud, obnoxious, hilarious, and every second word was some maritime slang or a derivative of F. He has been on daily eye drops for decades for dry eyes. Sure, okay, cool. I hear screaming down the hall and run in, and he's wedged against the wall and the bed just screaming, I F it up boys. I don't know what the F is F-ing happening, but it's F addition. Turns out he mistakenly put Jublia, which is an antifungal ointment for toenails, in his eye, thinking it was his eye drops. The strangest part was the bottle has this miniature sponge at the end, so you soak the sponge then paint it on like a gel. He painted this antifungal ointment onto his eye, which immediately went red and angry, then proceeded to do the other one. So he's at the eye wash station, and I'm talking to poison control, and they are pretty stunned because they have zero data on what happens to a human eyeball when it's painted in antifungal. I can hear the staff at the other end kind of snickering under her breath, and she asks, can you compare and contrast the eyes? Well, he put it in both eyes. The line goes silent because I can tell she is howling. Guy was totally fine, but it was a standout for sure. Even someone who doesn't swear would be screaming the same thing. Responded to a call of 2 minors being kidnapped and their parents being beaten in front of them and then taken someplace else. One was around 3 years and the other one was 6. They were held captive in an apartment out of hundreds of residential apartments which not easy to locate. Upon reaching there we found out that the boy 6 was just playing with us to see if we would actually respond. Their parents were so embarrassed by all of that and vowed to not give them mobile until they are adults. When I was 5 I called 911 on an old cell phone. It had a SIM card and everything removed, but who knew it could still dial 911? And asked them to come over for a play date. They were pretty grumpy about it, but I don't think my mom had to pay a fine. It seems like the kind of thing that should only be punished on the second offense. At least we know the kid can dial 911 and now knows it's for emergencies only. It had a SIM card and everything removed, but who knew it could still dial 911? This is a feature mandated for all US cell phones and networks. If you dial 911, the phone will use any available cellular network, even if the phone is not activated or shows no signal from your carrier. According to my sources, it's in most European phones too. Relative is a police dispatcher. Kids calling 911 from an inactive phone is a weekly occurrence. Usually the 911 op manages to get the kid to give the phone to a grown-up. Otherwise our county regulations say they must dispatch an officer. It definitely is a thing in Europe as well. There is also an automatic redirect to 112, the European emergency number, if you dial 911 or 999 I believe. Kid driving his new truck down a residential street, wet from a recent rain, lost control and hit a parked car, overcorrected and rolled it once back onto its wheels up onto a lawn. He told the fire chief he had gunned it to impress his girlfriend and the chief just looked at him and asked, so, was she impressed? Haha. When I was a young punk my GF let me drive her brand new truck. I fishtailed it badly turning onto a wet freeway on ramp, coming to an awkward but fortunately harmless stop across both lanes. She was quite a better sport in many more ways than I probably deserved. But that time, OC was not impressed. You have a nice way with words. Really drives the point home. Got called to a shooting. A guy says he received a text message from an anonymous number saying his brother has been shot. He checks all the hospitals with no luck. He goes to his brother's apartment, but gets no response at his door, but sees his car and can hear the TV on. We get there, attempt to get an answer at the door. Eventually we kick the door in to make sure he wasn't dying in his apartment. We boot the door, announce police, and find him asleep in his bed. The guy tells us that he got a new phone number and decided to mess with his brother by texting him he had been shot. He then fell asleep and forgot about the text and was woken up by us. So many wasted resources on his idiotic prank. He must have been catatonic to miss different groups of people knocking on his door. He was pretty intoxicated, hence the idea for the prank. One of my old bosses once built a new shed in his backyard to replace his old, worn out one. He moved everything from the old one to the new one. Then decided that the best way to remove the old one was by burning it down. He ended up with no sheds and the nickname Sparky. Arthur No Sheds Jackson. Look. Forget about the sheds. They don't matter. Paramedic here. We responded to this 54-year-old having chest pain. Man was having a heart attack. Dude didn't want to go to the hospital because it's too early in the day. That's it. We tried to convince him to go. Got the ear doc to talk to him and he wouldn't budge. He signed a refusal. Later that same night, his family found him dead in the living room. We got to him and started CPR, meds, everything. Dude didn't make it. When we advise you to go to the hospital, go. Too early in the day, sir. They asked you to go to the hospital, not to have an alcoholic beverage. There is a slight difference. Safer than the evenings when all the drunks and fights and accidents come in. Most staffing available. Cath lab, surgeons, etc. An interesting bloke lit a fire in a 40-gallon steel drum so his goats could keep warm in winter. The drum was inside of a barn full of hay. No flue. One of the goats knocked it down presumably and set the whole place alight. -12 appliances were required to bring it under control. You reminded me of a call I went to. No fire in this case, but a building collapse with person trapped. A chicken farmer was in a shed, lying face down with an air conditioning unit on his back. It had fallen off the roof and bopped him on the head, briefly knocking him out. When he'd come around he'd felt a weight on him and couldn't feel his legs. So he got his phone out and called us because he thought the roof had fallen on him and paralyzed him. We turned up and found him with the SAC unit on his back and several chickens sitting on his head. He also had his legs in a puddle of rainwater, numb from the cold. We lifted the AC unit off, fought off the chickens, got the paramedics to check him and suggested he go inside, change his trousers and have a cup of tea. Edit. The ambulance crew did strongly advise him to go to hospital, but he just as strongly declined on the basis that he was too busy. Probably not the worst idea to call for emergency services after loss of consciousness and perceived nerve damage. Why wasn't he taken to hospital? If he lost consciousness though, after something like that knocks you out, you are an automatic ride from my training some years ago. Not only that, but we would have assumed there was some form of possible spinal injury, so they would put a collar and some form of board to keep their spine still. I think it has changed a bit now, and they don't use the board as much. Yeah. This guy's telling his funny story, and I'm just sitting here horrified about the level of negligence. Someone gets hit on the head, loses consciousness, tells you they can't feel their fucking legs, and you don't even take them in to check them out? The fuck? Got called to a priority job. The caller was kayaking in a lake and said that there was an unresponsive male in the water. So off we went. Lights and sirens. We requested paramedics and fire to attend as well for the rescue operation. There were about 6 emergency vehicles attending, including a rescue boat. We got there within minutes and met the caller, who showed us where the guy was. He was just swimming, minding his own business. The caller said he was unresponsive, but really he was just ignoring her. Had a chat with the guy. He seemed alright. Said he swims here every day and likes the quiet. No issues. Would have been nice if the caller told the operator that he was still conscious and swimming rather than unresponsive. Lol, is the man responsive? No, he's not. I said hi and he didn't even wave back. No response at all. Meanwhile, we are risking our lives driving 3 times over the speed limit through traffic to go and save someone that didn't need saving. Fun times. Not to mention that if someone else really needed your service, you would be busy. Had a guy call because he had the cure to COVID and needed a ride to the local education hospital so he could share it. Dude was so high on meth he ended up having 4 or 5 binders worth of scientific looking notes. God only knows what was actually in them. The cure to COVID. He already told you. Woman ran out of gas, filled up a 2-liter Fanta bottle at the gas station and walked back to her car. Tried to dump it in the tank but kept spilling. Decided to illuminate the situation with her cigarette lighter. Luckily she was not seriously injured. Guy got into an argument with his child's mother. He tried to hold onto the car when she drove away and was drug about 2 blocks. His feet were all messed up. so he decided to clean them off with a jug of Arbor Mist. These two incidents happened within 3 blocks of each other. Guy got into an argument with his child's mother. He tried to hold onto the car when she drove away and was drug about 2 blocks. His feet were all messed up, so he decided to clean them off with a jug of Arbor Mist. Reminds me of a story of a contractor who injured his hand pretty badly. Big gaping wound in his hand. He filled it with putty and went on with his life until it got gangrene. Yeah, you really ought to use silicone caulking for a job like that. Old-fashioned super glue is where it's at. When I was an EMT in New York City years ago, we had a call for a man unresponsive. We entered an upscale apartment that was a hoard, floor-to-ceiling newspapers and magazines. Just a mess. The woman who called said her brother was in his bedroom sick. We entered his room and it was pretty obvious that he had already passed away. She had placed a bowl under his mouth because he had hemorrhaged, which had coagulated the day before. It was crazy. We asked her why she hadn't called sooner and she said thought he'd get better. The joke around the house was if you have to put a bowl under a relative who is bleeding from the mouth, call 911. Don't wait. Never thought we'd have to advise anyone to do that. But there ya go. Also, it was Thanksgiving. Didn't eat any cranberry sauce that year. Well, I was taking a lady home from dialysis and she decided to eat a Snickers in the back of the ambulance. And she started choking. Had to do the Heimlich and tell her to finish her food at home. She wasn't herself because she was hungry. While in high school, an ex-student came to visit and we asked him what he does for a living. He said he's an neurosurgeon. We asked him for stories, of course. And he said he was brought a man who was hit with a nail gun on the forehead and still alive. Somehow, he told us he had to call his older colleagues who were off shift to come to assist. Because based on what he learned in med school, the dude should be dead. His older colleague told him jokingly that if the patient dies, it's not on the ex-student because nobody has ever seen something like this. They managed to pull the nail out and the patient made full recovery. Apparently, the nail went perfectly between his lobes, causing little damage. The patient said he'll change his ways and stop doing dumb stuff, only to be brought in a few weeks later due to a motorcycle accident where he fell and hit the sidewalk with his head. He had no helmet. The surgeon said he could only watch him slowly die from the concussion and bleeding that followed. He said it was shocking and traumatizing, but he eventually made peace with it. He said that he could save people from many injuries, but in the end, he can't save them from themselves. Reminds me of that one guy who survived having a huge auger drill bit go straight through his head. https://www.crison.com/news/drillbit accident survivor's tale on TV/ he lost an eye, but his brain was a-okay. Page to a fire at a campground in the early morning. Fire department is hosing down a big Class A motorhome. The occupants are my patients. Story goes as follows. They were of retirement age and had just bought the motorhome a week prior. They were on their first trip. They had awoken to the gas alarm going off and smelled gas. The husband proceeded to search for the source of the leak. Naturally, he's looking through cabinets and opening compartments. Unbelievably, he decided to use his cigarette lighter to help him see. Yup, smelled gas and lit his lighter. Obviously the whole thing goes boom right in his face. They managed to escape the camper, which burned to a total loss. I gave them an assessment and they actually had only minor injuries. Mostly to pride, I think. But I still remember his beard. It was so brittle after having been cooked a bit. It was breaking off in little bits that I had to sweep out of the ambulance later. Good times. Don't use your lighter to find a gas leak, kids. Imagine finally retiring and immediately discovering that your husband of 25 plus years is actually an idiot. My husband is not exactly an idiot in general, but he smokes, and one time he did something really stupid resulting in him spilling gas all over the garage floor, and then he decided to light a cigarette to calm his nerves. He got upset about me dragging him out of there in a jiffy, but in hindsight of course he realized that was not a bad thing to happen. Oh, I got this one. 1998. Paramedic called to a city bus driver with pain in right foot. Drive out to meet the bus full of passengers. Enter bus. Say we need to remove shoe. Said if it's broken or sprained I can cut it off to not hurt you. If you truly think it's safe, I can untie and try to remove. He says he should be okay to remove. I untie my shoes in the literal millisecond the laces loosen 10%. He goes on, ah, holy cow, the pain is leaving. His shoes were too tight. His shoes. Too tight, but here's the kicker, he still wanted us to take him in. And that's what you call insurance fraud. Double leg amputee drove his lawnmower a mile down into the woods, had the battery die, and got stuck. It was toned as double leg amputee on a mower, so everyone thought we had catastrophic trauma. Policy also dictated a helicopter being dispatched. We all get to the scene to find out he just can't get back to civilization. They carted him out on a UTV. It's me. I'm the idiot, he proclaims before getting into his adapted pickup, nearly backing into our truck, and driving off into the night. I had a double amputee who was riding an ATV hunting deer, fell off and broke his arm. After I got done laughing in the supply room, I had to go ask him how exactly he was planning to get a dead deer onto the ATV. Maybe call a friend, a dear friend, a strong young buck. 10-year-old rushed into the ER for excessive bloody stool/diarrhea. Within the first 5 minutes we realized it was from flaming hot Cheetos. My friends had a 2-tiered cake for her sweet 16. It was white and trimmed with black roses made out of icing. Pretty good cake, to be honest. Everyone in my family had a slice. Next morning, use the bathroom and have a mild heart attack cause my poop is fucking neon blue. Casually mentioned it to my dad and he had the same issue, as well as everyone else in the house. Turns out, excessive black food coloring will do that. Still makes me giggle to this day. Imagine waking up after a night partying. How many Smurfs did I eat? Not going to the doctor for 20 years and then finding out you have a laundry list of health problems after your second heart attack because you thought the first one was bad gas. Ugh. Emaciated guy on the ground dead. Ask if he has any health issues. Told no. Does he take any meds? No. When was the last time he went to a doctor? Oh, he doesn't go to doctors. Eat a fixed typo. He should eat apples. Just a couple. Got a chest pain job. Guy's implanted defib was firing over and over. Broken? Strange. Non-life threatening arrhythmia. I can't recall. But he was perfusing well and walking around. Gap. As loud as you can imagine. We heard him from the street. Gap. Ah, Jesus fucking Christ, just fucking kill me already. Gap. Poor bastard. Still have the EKG somewhere. Amazing. Sir, do you know what might have brought this on? Fuck me if I know. Gap. Goddamn Jets couldn't score a gap touchdown if I carried them to the gap end zone. A gap. Holes. Got a job for a woman bitten by a horse. Arrived to find a mom and 5 kids in a paddock right next to the road. She was bleeding gorgeously from the hand. Through a blood-soaked towel. With the kids screaming and crying. She thought that, since horses were vegetarians, it wouldn't bite her. She didn't know how to feed a horse an apple. And that horse ate 2 of her fingers. But they are vegetarians, she said like 5 times. I wanted to say so are lawnmowers, but they'll take fingers. To Yanatwit. So many more. Perhaps I'll feel like typing again later. Please share more. The defib guy story was amazing. Poor bastard. Not an emergency responder, but I worked customer service for years, and we had emergency responders come to help us with this case. So I'll tell the story for them lol. Years ago behind the counter at McDonald's they used to have these glass see-through kettles for the tea. We had an enraged drunken customer storm behind the counter, grabbing things and throwing them all over the place. He grabbed the boiling hot kettle and smashed it against his head. Panicked as he realized, slipped over in the mess he'd made on the floor, and ended up sitting down on top of the largely intact glass bottom of the kettle, and it cupped nicely around his bottom, impaling several times into his. Well, you get the idea. Needless to say, first aid hadn't prepared any of us for this type of thing, and we basically just stared at him with our eyes and mouths wide open until the ambulance got there. Someone who actually did get the spiky broken glass up their anus by accident. It was bound to happen eventually.